Welcome to Hornbill TV's Primetime with Ngullie, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what we have got for you today for Saturday. The government of Nagaland seems adamant that it will go ahead with the urban body elections. In fact, the Department of Municipal Affairs has issued a statement urging all registered voters in the municipalities to get ready to vote on May 16. Second, it seems the this is actually bad news. It seems the armed Naga political groups are going at it again. After years of relative peace, it is a strange feeling to hear about them coming out in the open to fight. If you are in the age group of 20 to 30, you most probably have not experienced what it means to have a gun pointed at you either by the Indian military or the Naga undergrounds, or what it feels to be threatened, or what it feels to see people shot dead regularly in Nagaland. The covenant of reconciliation or not, the violent expression of factional power play always bring back a lot of bad memories for a lot of Naga people. The bloodshed and people being killed almost every day, the threat and the fear psychosis among ordinary people those days. So it feels very strange that we are hearing of an actual firefight that is coming out of the urban heartland here. Horrible. It's a very horrible time for us to be remembering all this, especially if you are someone who was not there before the ceasefire. We'll be talking about it more later on. These are the top news picks for Saturday. Shootout between two factions of the NSCN-K was reported on Saturday in Tilaka village, one of the most populated areas in Dimapur. The government has said that the question of tax on land and building and removal of the word delayed in the provisions have been met. However, it has said that a suggestion for nominating women has been struck down by the Supreme Court. The Naga People's Front Legislative Party has said that the NPF has submitted a letter of support to the alliance because the party's elected members had been reduced to a tiny minority, but they are yet to receive any reply from the alliance. We've got bad news for you, ladies and gentlemen. The ghost of the deadly factional violence that ravaged Naga lives during the 80s and early 90s seem to have returned. A shootout between two factions of the NSCN-K, Kanko, was reported on Saturday at about 8:15 a.m. in Tilaka village, which is one of the most populated areas in Dimapur. From the reports that we have had so far, including inputs from my colleague, my reporter Adona, who checked out at the event earlier today, the shooting was between armed cadres supporting NSCN leaders Isaac Sumi and of course Kango Konyak. Our viewers will recall that both the group's leaders have impeached each other from their positions as leaders, and there had been a lot of tensions in this regard. According to updates, approximately 20 armed cadres in uniform arrived in about 3 vehicles, surrounded the office at Teleka of the Kango-led faction at about 8:15 a.m. and fired around approximately 85 rounds. Later, the cadres reportedly moved out towards Tolovi at about 8:35 a.m. Reports said that there was a retaliatory fire too from the Kango supporting cadres. We haven't received any reports of casualties stemming from the reported shootout as yet. However, updates on Saturday said 53 spent shells, including those from AK-47s, Heckler and Koch's and M16 rifles were recovered. The Nagaland police reached the spot at about 8:40 a.m. the report said. So far, we are yet to get any independent official statements in this regard from the authorities. It is also that the two factions might also give a press conference later in this regard.
Fiction not an issue. Andaz nishe kahagiwa bana zain.
This is not a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hope that this violence is resolved, especially considering that this has the potential to set off retaliatory killings that could destroy the peace we have been experiencing for the past 2 decades or so. Violence always begets violence, and of course, violence always leads to acts of vengeance. That's why it seems. That's what it seems back in the 90s and 80s. These days, in Nagaland, many armed factions prowl around. There are a lot of armed factions there. But 2 decades ago, there was basically only the NSC and IM, the NSCNK, that is Kaplang, and of course the NNC and FGN groups. Those were the 3 main groups those days. But for now, we have many organizations. So for those of you who might not know, normal days for the Naga people in the 80s and 90s were filled with constant fear and anxiety. Indian security forces ambushing the Naga fighters, Naga groups ambushing Indian security forces, cadres attacking rival cadres counter-attacking, people being shot in the streets and even villages. Of course, a lot of business people were also killed during those days. Most of our youths today do not know about the days when Nagaland was going through a horrific time of fear and bloodshed. Those days, it was almost every day that newspapers had reports of people who were killed, shot, including those who were killed due to mistaken identities. Killing was almost every day that the newspaper Nagaland Post actually had a small box on the top left of the newspaper exclusively to report only about factional killings from the previous days. Some common citizens were also killed due to what reports said were mistaken identification. It was quite common those days. Likewise, it was common also for Indian security forces to detain and torture people. This was one of our biggest fears when we were growing up, and I am not even talking about the massacre of villagers in Nagaland during the 50s, 60s and the 70s during Indian military operations. Fear of the undergrounds, fear of the Indian military, and fear of our future was what we went through those days. Fear was the air that we breathed in when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s. Let's hope Nagaland doesn't return to those days of horror. Let's check out the next news bit. The Municipal Affairs Department has issued a statement asking all registered voters to vote in the urban local body elections on May 16. The government has replied to issues concerning conduct of the elections, the question of tax on land and building, and of course on the question of 33% reservation of seats for 33% reservation of seats for women in the municipal agencies. The department stated that the Supreme Court has directed that the ULB elections must be conducted in Nagaland without any further delay in accordance with the 74th Amendment of the Constitution that stipulates 33% reservation for women. In the light of the Supreme Court's judgment, the state is bound to conduct the elections as scheduled. That's what the Municipal Affairs Department said today. With regard to the issue of tax on land and building, the department clarified that the provisions relating to it have already been removed from the Nagaland Municipal Act 2001 by the NMA 3rd Amendment Act 2016. Further, the request for replacement of the word deleted instead of omitted has been made, the department said. The department said that as per the legal opinion, the words omission, omitted and deleted have no difference, but should be read as with the same meaning and character it carries in the context of the amendment. As for the suggestion about nominating women with voting rights instead of reservation of words, the department said that the Supreme Court had struck down the submission earlier. MLA and leader of the Naga People's Front Legislative Party, Kuzo Luzo Nina, addressed the media today at the NPF Central Office in Kohima. Nina said that the NPF had submitted a letter of support because the party's elected members had been reduced to a tiny minority. The argument was that it could not form an opposition with just 2 MLAs. Nonetheless, he said, a reply has yet to be received from the alliance till now. When asked about any chances of a merger with the alliance, NPF MLA and also the NPF's Secretary General Achambemo Kikon said the question of a merger does not arise. If their letter of support is not accepted by the alliance, the NPF will be left with no other choice but will have to take another step. That's what they said.
We have already submitted our letter of support to the government because of some few reasons. One is we have been reduced to hopeless minority, so we cannot form an opposition, the 2 of us alone. And we have seen that NCP, they have already formed an opposition, 7 of them. So we thought it was best to be a part of the government, and especially on Naga political issue, since NPF champions the Naga political cause. For that reason, we have extended our support to the government. But yet, we have not received a reply whether they have accepted or rejected. We are yet to receive a reply. It's the first assembly. So there is no time to put any questions. Because question you have to give it within 10 days ahead, and that also the BAC will approve it. So since there was no time, nobody can put.
This is a waiting game, or if you would like to put it this way, I think it's mind games of politics. I haven't given much thought to this development for now, but by what the NPF leaders are saying is this: it might go on the offensive even if they can't technically be opposition. The reason is this: the NCP with 7 MLAs is already the largest non-alliance party. But instead of being in the opposition, as its high command had indicated earlier, the NCP had expressed its support to the NDBP, PJB. Another reason why the NPF might be going on the offensive, even if it has only 2 MLAs, is this: the tone and signals from their statements aren't already alliance friendly. For instance, Kikon said, if there is no acceptance to the letter of support given by the NPF will have to take another step. So I think we'll be wondering here, what other step can it take besides being in the opposition? So I think that is a very good indication of where the NPF will be going, because they have still not yet heard from the alliance. This would most likely be a minority opposition bench with other small party MLAs and independents who didn't find any seat in the alliance. Another signal is Nina's statement about the ULB election. Nina said during the press conference that the government should listen to the voice of the people and withhold the elections until the issue is resolved, or at least review the Municipal Act 2021. This statement plays opposite to the government ordering conduct of the elections actually. In fact, just today, the government had asked voters to make the elections a resounding success by going to vote. So there is this ideological game play too. Nina said that the main reason the government is pushing for the ULB elections is monetary, but the NPF feels that why should the people lose their political rights just because of money? That was his explanation. The decision of the people is higher than the decision of the Supreme Court, he said. Again, the NPF government in 2017 tried to enforce it, but it failed to implement it too, he said. So the present government should listen to the people and not to repeat the same mistake, the leader said. So did you notice the ideological posturing in this tone there? We will have to wait and see about that. Tropical cyclone Freddy has affected more than 5 lakh people in southeastern Africa's Malawi. The United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said on Friday. In a statement, UN agency said the cyclone has affected over 5 lakh people, including at least 326 people who were killed and more than 1,80,000 people displaced. With the flood waters beginning to subside, government-led relief efforts are expanding and focusing on reaching displaced people. However, some areas remain cut off due to the extremely challenging conditions on the ground. Aid workers are said to be mobilizing air transport and boats to transport supplies and for search and rescue efforts in locations that cannot be accessed by road. Now let's see what's happening in regard to the Ukraine-Russian war. So now the International Criminal Court on Friday announced an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin on the war crime accusation of unlawfully deporting Ukrainian children, but Moscow has dismissed the order as void. Russia is not a member of the ICC, so we don't know if or how Putin could ever face prosecution for his alleged crimes. More than 16,000 Ukrainian children have been deported to Russia since the February 24, 2022 invasion, according to Ukraine. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan told AFP that Putin was now liable for arrest if he sets foot in any of the court's more than 120 member states.
Today, 17th of March 2023, the International Criminal Court has issued 2 warrants of arrest in the Ukraine situation. For Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, and for Maria Lvova-Belova, Commissioner of the Russian President for Children's Rights, for the alleged war crimes of deportation of children from Ukrainian occupied territories into the Russian Federation. It is forbidden by international law for occupied powers to transfer civilians from the territory they live in to other territories. Children enjoy special protection under the Geneva Convention. The contents of the warrants.
So now this is the big question, ladies and gentlemen. Could Putin be arrested? It's very unlikely that Putin will be arrested while he is in power, of course. The ICC does not have its own police force, so it relies on countries to enforce its arrest warrants. Of course, Putin can't be arrested if he sets foot in any of the courts more than 120 member states. But Putin is unlikely to travel to a country that agreed to the statute. Even if he were to travel abroad, there's no guarantee that he would be arrested, because the countries he traveled to would need to be willing enough to arrest him. Even if he did, and the countries are willing to arrest him, it is more than a risk, because Putin is the president of a country that is one of the most powerful countries in the world. Russia, a nuclear power, has massive stockpile of nuclear weapons. Arresting him could have drastic consequences for any country that attempts to arrest him. In fact, the former Sudanese president Omar al-Bashir traveled internationally many times, even though there was an ICC arrest warrant for his involvement in the Darfur genocide. As some of you will know, the Darfur genocide killed about 80,000 to 4 lakh people, with more than 3 million people being affected by the violence. So again, even if Putin is no longer in power, a government that wanted to extradite him would face a serious problem. This is the problem. The Russian constitution prohibits the extradition of Russian citizens to other states. So if Putin can't be arrested, what's the whole point to this? This is the whole point. The arrest warrant itself will have a significant impact on public opinion, both internationally and within Russia itself. The International Criminal Court, which has judges from around the world, is still respected as an international voice. That means that the charges will weaken Putin's global standing and affect Russia's foreign policy. Those were the top news picks for Saturday, ladies and gentlemen. We will be bringing you more news updates later on. Keep watching Hornbill TV. I'm Ngullie. See you next time.